Welcome to the final reveal of my Sukhoi 27 flanker in digital camo. I uploaded an unboxing video of this kit more than 3 years ago and now she's finally done. REVELL's Sukhoi Su-27 flanker in 70-second scale, kit number 04937. This was one of the first kits I bought when I started modeling again, but the difficulty and number of parts just scared me off. A few months ago I decided that I had gathered enough experience and started building. I recently ran a survey that showed you wanted my videos as detailed as possible. If you just want to see the finished model, skip near the end of this video. The flanker has always been one of my favorite fighter jets because it just looks amazing, and I'm also impressed by its maneuverability. In this footage of the simulation DCS World you can see what I mean. I often use this simulation as a reference because you can freely move the camera around and the jets are quite detailed. The REVELL kit of the flanker is a rebox of a Swesta kit from 2014 and has 210 parts. Overall the parts and surfaces are nicely detailed. As you can see here, I still had to improve a few parts. For example, I drilled holes in this tiny ejection seat handle. Overall the cockpit turned out quite nicely, even though some of the colors suggested by the manual were just wrong. I always look up photos of the real aircraft just to be sure. The black areas here were painted again in blue later. The fit of the main parts was relatively good, but I had to use some filler in a few areas. The only serious issue was that the wings were a bit warped. I used a hairdryer to soften the plastic and carefully bent the wings to the correct position. Then I added a nose weight just to be sure and assembled the engine housings. Next I masked off the cockpit and wheel wells. I primed everything with a couple of thin layers of Vallejo's black surface primer and started painting the engine nozzles with a mix of several colors to recreate heat stains and wear. Next I masked off the upper side of the flanker, mixed light blue with light grey paint and tried a so-called marbling coat on the bottom of the plane. You can't really see it here, but it turned out quite well. As if masking off the engine inlets and housings wasn't difficult enough, all layers of paint and primer came off again in a few areas when I removed the tape. Later I read that I'm not the only one struggling with Vallejo's primer. Next time using it I might wash the parts prior to priming for better adhesion. If you got any tips on that, just leave me a comment. Next up I masked off the engines and used various mixtures of steel, aluminum, blue, bronze and rust to recreate that signature look. For the hatches I used a different color. I also added a few streaks with enamels and repeated the process on the bottom of the flanker. It was quite a job to mask and paint the engines and hatches, but I think the result isn't that bad for a 70-second scale model. As soon as I bought the kit I knew that this flanker should get a special livery. I always loved the digital camo the Ukrainian Air Force uses on some of their jets, so I experimented with a digital camo template and cut out my own masks. While the result looked quite good, it wasn't precise enough and would have been way too much work to cover the whole aircraft. Therefore, I got myself foxbot's digital camo masks and started with a mix of light blue. The cockpit glass was masked with Scotch magic tape and masking fluid. Foxbot's masks are a bit difficult to remove from the sheet, but are made of a sturdy material. Because I always start camo schemes with the lightest color, I had to use the outer masks. It would have been easier to use the inner masks, but it still worked without major difficulties. My mistake was that the black base coat was still showing through some areas. I did not completely cover these areas with light blue color, because I thought they would become grey anyways. Therefore I had to do some corrections here. So after the light blue I sprayed the light grey areas, and after that the dark blue areas. This process was always the same. I looked up the number of the mask and its position on the aircraft in foxbot's manual and removed it from the sheet. As I said, this was the trickiest part because the masks were sticking so well that I was afraid that they could be torn, but it worked flawlessly. After removing the mask, I placed it in the according area on the model, masked the surroundings and airbrushed it. I did not wait very long, but instead removed the masks as soon as the paint was dry. I did not have any problems with the paint or primer coming off again, until I masked the radar dome. If you have any additional tips for the usage of Vallejo's primer, please tell me. These panels on the stabilizer and the radar dome were painted in a medium grey. I used tons of masking tape and masking fluid in some areas, but the final result was quite convincing. Then it was time to paint some details. I started off with the gun and those heat protection panels and added scratch-built rear mirrors and other details to the cockpit glass. After painting the gear doors, pylons, probes and antennas, I sprayed on a clear coat of Camo of MIG gloss varnish. This kit comes with a ton of decals. Unfortunately, I did have some problems with silvering on the larger ones. I guess it's my fault because I used Camo of MIG's varnish for the first time and probably thinned it down too much. I even tried to scrape away some of the excess decal film, which kind of made it better. I also got myself some decals of the Ukrainian Air Force for the digital camo scheme. While the decals were setting, I painted the landing gear, which I masked with masking liquid. I really like this product, it's very cheap and you can easily remove it when it's dry. To add more detail to the landing gear, I used nylon thread to recreate wires. I also used fiber and tiny plastic parts in the wheel wells for electronic boxes, cables and whatnot. This was quite tricky and messy because of all the super glue on my fingers, but I wanted to add as much detail as I could. The gear bays were a bit tricky because of those tiny hinges. The landing gear itself was difficult to install, but is very sturdy. Then this ugly pilot and I agreed that the plane would look much more badass with some hardware attached to it. Therefore I built and painted some R-27 and R-73 missiles. Furthermore, I drilled their engine nozzles so they look more realistic. After replacing a decal that I had destroyed in a reckless action because I wanted to spray the cockpit area in the correct color, I sprayed everything with Vallejo's satin varnish. Then I was finally able to unmask the cockpit and mount the IRST. Even though the Ukrainians used the version P1M of the flanker, where the IRST is installed in the center of the cockpit glass, I decided to leave it as it is. Here you can see how I mounted the cockpit glass. The last thing to mount were these tiny see-through position lights and the pitot probe. Last but not least, I used black enamels with white spirit to create a light wash to accentuate the panels, and that's it. Here you can see the final result of approximately 5 months on and off work. I was quite busy with finishing my master studies, my job and illness, so I did not have a lot of time to build. The photo shoot and editing of the photos also took me a lot of time, thanks to my assistant. Here you can see the flanker with some equipment from Hasegawa's aerospace ground equipment and weapon loading set. These kits were meant for US aircraft, but since other air forces use similar equipment, I decided to present the flanker with them anyways. Maybe this takes place at a Western air show or a joint training, so don't be too picky, please. I will also try to use more video footage instead of this boring slideshow in my next videos. The good news is that there should be more time for modeling now. Therefore, I already got myself another Sukhoi 27 from Trumpeter, but my next build will be the Eurofighter Typhoon with these special markings of the Austrian Air Force for the National Pride Group build. Check my videos for an unboxing and more information about the group build. To stay tuned on my building process and other things, subscribe to my channel and like my page on Facebook. Links will be in the description below. Also leave me some feedback, I know there is still room for a lot of improvement. Leave me your opinions in the comments below or on my Facebook page. Thank you all for watching, have a nice day, bye.